Hello there, and welcome to the Impact Zone podcast. We are back. We are here again to talk more TNA wrestling shenanigans. And today, I actually kind of want to talk a bit more in broad sense about professional wrestling. This does relate to TNA, and I guess we'll be referring a lot to TNA and the way that they do things and whatnot, as far as like what we're discussing here. And today we're discussing storytelling. And I guess we're sort of contrasting that with wrestling, because wrestling and storytelling are sort of separate. In some ways, obviously the wrestling tells a story in a sense, and the story does inform upon what you will do in a wrestling match and whatnot. If you don't really have much story, then you've kind of got to create it in a match to a degree. To some extent, like you're just going to have a sort of semi-generic match for the most part. If you don't have much story going on between you two, you can still have a really good match. But that match isn't really going to mean much. It's not going to have much stakes because there's no real story behind it. And the more stakes and the more like meaning and depth there is between a story and a match is, tantamount to the enjoyment of said match. And yeah, you've got to be able to like discuss the wrestling or whatever there is, because sometimes there's not very much wrestling going on, because again, there's a lot of guys who just use strikes and whatnot or whatever. But like that's a bit different. Like again, like, and it depends what the story is. Is this a blood feud? What is this? You can take the Drew McIntyre CM Punk situation or whatever, or the Eddie Edwards versus Kazarian match that happened a few months ago, I think it was now. Like those matches were blood feud matches. They were like, sort of, I guess, Hell in a Cell style matches that, this is a feud that's been brewing and these guys hate each other. This isn't going to be a wrestling match. This is going to be violent. This is going to be a fight. And, like, fights typically, like, aren't super interesting. Like, just generic fights. But when you have a hot angle, or you have two hot wrestlers, or you have fans invested in those wrestlers, like, then they're into it. Like, like, even if, like, two wrestlers have never met before, like, that can actually be a big thing. Look at when Kurt Angle first debuted, and he had a big pull-apart brawl with Samoa Joe. This was a match that people wanted to see, and that was a very simple story, realistically, to start off that like feud or rivalry between them and whatnot. It got more complex and whatnot later and deeper later, but that's not bad if a story starts simple and then gains in intensity. It was still pretty darn intense to start with, but it kept gaining intensity and layers later on. It was still a fairly basic, storytelling trope of a pull-apart brawl, which happens a lot in wrestling. Not all the time, because you can't do anything all the time, because, again, otherwise it gets, too trite and too old and too repetitive. You've got to do different things with everyone and try to do, the classics. There's only so many ways to tell stories. Like, that's the thing. Like, realistically. But again, like, you've got to try to tell those stories, and the wrestling has got to be paramount in that, or whatever it is in that, like, if, like, why did that wrestler, do this, or whatever? why did he resort to using the chair? Why did he resort to this? Not just because he's a cheater or whatever. He is a cheater, but he knew he couldn't win. He tried to get him with his finisher, and now he's going to go to the chair because or whatever it is, because he knows he can't beat him. The guy just kicked out of his finisher and whatnot. So now he's just going to go to the chair, go to the easy option. This will, I hit him a few times with the chair, hit my finisher on it with him on the chair or whatever. That'll finish this match. That's part of the storytelling. It might not be wrestling per se, like an arm drag or, a Fujiwara armbar or whatever else, but that's the intent of the story. That's where this story is flowing and going towards the next step, wherever it is going next, so that's what you've got to be able to sell. Like, what was the motivation? Why? Not just moves, intent, and, not like you have to agree with everything that the wrestler did, but you have to be able to analyze what they did and explain to the audience why. Even if the audience knows why they did it, you've got to be able to explain that away and say, this is why they did that. They knew that they couldn't beat that wrestler. They just tried their finisher, and now they're frustrated, and they're going to resort to this. This is, not the way, not this way, that's a great call in that sort of moment. Or, their hatred is boiling over for each other, he's gotten too frustrated. This is getting too personal. He can't control himself, that sort of thing. You're trying to delve into the psychology of the angle or whatever it is that's going on in front of you when you're a commentator, or when you're brewing this up or whatever for the fans to actually see it, or when you're a wrestler going, well, why are we doing this in this match at this time this way? Why are you putting the match together in that way? Why are you going to this at the, every part of it needs to be thought of and needs to be understood by every single level of every single party that's involved in this match, because that's, what you're going to do. So everyone needs to understand the motivations for their character and for the audience to understand it, because they're only as invested and not clued in, but they're only as far clued in to the character motivations as what the characters are themselves. So if they haven't got the motivation for something, like if I just go outside of the ring and hit somebody with the chair for no real reason, because I can, or perhaps you could explain it away, this guy's a cheater, he's a heel, whatever, you could explain it away like that. But again, yeah, or whatever, but still, I just hit him with the chair. I lost that match. Where was my motivation to do that? Or did I lose the match? Or what was the intent there? Why did I do that? Or whatever. What was my thinking there? Did I get caught with the chair? What am I going to do from there? You've got to think through all of these things. And is the referee going to have to turn kind of a blind eye? Did they actually see it accidentally because, well, they just turned their head at the wrong time? But now, do they just ignore that they actually saw it, or pretend that they didn't see it, or just call it as a shoot and be like, hey, wait a minute, what are you doing with that chair? And things like that. The same thing when a botch happens, or whatever. If a botch happens and you're in a match, it's well, you've got to kind of play it like that was sort of planned in a way. Yeah, he was meant to miss me. Of course he was meant to miss me. I was meant to dodge out of the way, and he was meant to miss his move off the top or whatever it was. or his leg drop or whatever it was. I fucked up, obviously, but you can't do anything if you've fucked up. You can apologize and say, "Oh, I fucked that up. So sorry," or I mistimed it or whatever, that sort of thing, and whatnot. But like, you've got to move on from that. You've got to make the next logical step. They came crashing down. Well, next thing that I'm going to do is go for a cover on them, because that's the only thing that makes sense. If I was like, I've seen a few of these where they've sold the move that didn't even hit them. It's like, well, that's the wrong thing to do. Yes, you've fucked it up by not taking the move, but don't fuck it up even more by selling air effectively. Like, that's another one of those things where you should never sell nothing. Like, you shouldn't sell air effectively. You know, you should sell things that actually seemingly hit or whatever, things like that. You should always sell, but you should always not sell the things that, don't really hit. Like, you shouldn't, or like, again, like overselling. It's all right to oversell in certain circumstances and whatnot, but again, like, you should, like, that's another thing about the storytelling. How much are you going to sell, and why are you going to sell that much? Like, like, it's all about the story. Like, why am I selling that I'm knocked out? I'm knocked out because that's the idea of it. Like, or I'm selling that I'm knocked out because I want him to have to lift me dead weight into the ring, or whatever. Or am I selling it like I've jumped 5 feet out of the ring, like, this knocked me so hard that I'm being yeeted across the room, like, that's how good it was, or whatever, Some of that can work, like, whatnot, sometimes. But again, you need to know, well, how much is too much, or how much looks too silly or not real or whatever, and that sort of thing. And then, or sometimes, again, like, if you're just like, this is a comedy match and we're going to do comedy things, again, or this is a comedy spot, again, like, wrestling can and should be and include everything. It should include comedy, drama, happiness, sadness, fear, everything. It should have, not every single match, but it should have, well, some of that sort of every count of the human emotion. Shock, surprise, he kicked out! Like, I can't believe he kicked out. That was 3, referee. Are you blind? Or whatever, like, or, like we just saw, I don't want to mention too much, like, botches on certain people's parts or whatever. Like, when Damian Priest, I don't know whether he's meant to kick out. I don't know what it was at Money in the Bank. I don't know, or in theory, I think he was meant to kick out. Like, surely he was meant to kick out. Like, that or something else. I don't really know what would have, made sense there. Like, I don't think anyone was, like, there to, like, pull the referee out or anything like that to stop the count or whatnot, that sort of thing. So I don't know. It's tough to say because, yeah, I don't think that anything else makes sense. But obviously the 3 count wasn't meant to happen, and the ref, like, again, maybe that's the wrong call. I don't know, but this is the way the match was going, and sometimes, like, you've just got to fudge it. Like, even if you're the guy who's the opponent, of course, you can't make it look too fake, but again, you have, like, if you realize this guy doesn't look like he's going to kick out, which is really hard to do as well, I'll just make sure he kicks out. I'll pull his arm when, the 3's coming, just to make sure that he does kick out. Like, you should do that anyway, I think, sometimes, because, like, even if your opponent is going to kick out, well, if no one really notices it and you can do it well, then, yeah, just do it anyway, just to make sure that if somebody is a bit dazed and confused or has forgotten the spot or whatever it is, make sure that they kick out so that you can move on to the next thing and get to the next point that you're meant to. But it's tough to not call something as a shoot when it's right there in front of you. Like, that ruins the immersion in the thing. And again, like, it's one of those things of saying, well, he should have kicked out. Yes, 100% he should have kicked out, or whatever. He should have done whatever was necessary at that point to move the match along to the next thing, which was kicking out, like, at that point. But, like, you say, well, I don't know what happened. It was a botch, but, like, why was it a botch? And then if your referee has to not call it as a shoot, which he should, then you have to explain something, or you have to do something that makes it make sense, or whatever. Like, or you have to have your opponent being like, pulling you up effectively so that, you kick out effectively so that, the match can continue in the right way. So they're having to, really carry you at that point. Like, but it makes it look bad, and it makes it look fake, like, any of that stuff just makes, like, that's the thing. What wrestling is trying to do is make everything look as real as possible, for those, whatever, 2 hours, 3 hours, whatever it is, that you're there at this show. That's what it is. They're trying to tell you these stories between these, people that, culminate, or, whatever, in these, fights or in these matches or whatever. And that's got to be all thought of and considered and put together again, before, before this. So surely they would have rehearsed that spot again. Maybe he forgot, or maybe he was a bit dazed and confused, so you don't know, you can't really say too much, so I won't harp on it for too long. But again, like, anything that's there, you should almost always class things as you see them as a shoot, because, like, otherwise, it just looks hokey, and it sucks sometimes if you ruin the plans or whatever else by calling it as a shoot or whatever, or moving on like it's this was planned or whatever. Or now you're a crooked referee. Like, are you a crooked referee? You're just going to stop the count or whatever. Something, like, I don't know. That's a tough call to make, because, again, like, you really shouldn't, for the most part, unless it's, again, something else. So yeah, or you, like, they've got their earpieces in their ears to keep in contact with the back. So maybe you just be like, "Hey, back, can I, heel turn on him just to get this to the next point, or whatever, just so that we can move on and the audience isn't too confused as to why you didn't kick out and I didn't count the 3 or what, like." So yeah. But yeah, like, again, the wrestling, whatever there is, again, even if that's kicks and strikes, why these kicks and strikes? Why this? Why that? Like, you've got to be able to get that over to the audience, and to, again, to when you're got your match booker or whatever, behind the scenes, and when you're going to have your match out there in front of, the commentary and whatnot. They've got to understand the gravity or whatnot of your match. What is going on? What roughly will we see? Like, or whatnot. Why are things happening? Like, that sort of thing. What is the story? What are the motivations of this character? characters or whatever. Again, so just having that, this is something that you'll probably see somewhere in the match. We've planned this or we've planned that, and that's not, again, just for you guys and for the announcers. It's just also for everyone else that's in on the card, because it's like, well, if you say, oh, we're going out there and we're just going to call it in the ring, well, for one, you're going to, might do something that, was overexposed in the last match or whatever, or will overexpose something in the next match. So you've really got to understand, oh, okay, well, have I been watching the show? Do I know what, Steve Austin or whoever it is and The Rock are going to do in their match? Well, actually, wait a minute. Even if I don't know, let me just think about it. Who are their characters? What are their moves? What psychology is it? What's the story? Where's it going? You can work that sort of stuff out. If it was me and whatnot, what would I do? Why would I do it? How would I do it? Okay, cool. If I understand that, then I can understand what the motivations of their match will be, and then go, okay, well, I want to avoid things that will overexpose their match. Unless, of course, you're the main event, then it doesn't really matter. But again, you've also got to go, well, the headlock's been done 30 times on this card, so I'm not going to do a headlock, so I'm going to do something else. And that's where, you've got to be able to understand, not just yourself, and your opponent or opponents or whatever, but you've got to be able to understand the whole card and, the audience reaction to seeing 1,000 chin locks in a show, whatever it is. Again, they're not going to be too thrilled by seeing 1,000 chin locks in a show. Of course, you shouldn't be doing that many chin locks in a show. But again, just the idea of saying, well, we didn't really watch each other's matches, or we didn't really plan all this out or whatnot, and that sort of thing. So, of course, we've got all this stuff where somehow there was 1,000 chin locks on this show, and that made the show shit because there was just way too many people doing chin locks all friggin' night, and no one friggin' did anything about it. So that's, it's all about everything. These, again, we go back to, these are wrestlers. They're not just superstars. They're wrestling superstars. They might have multimedia appearances. They might be in films. They might be doing this other stuff. But, and some of them are more superstar than others, that's the thing. If you start saying everyone's a superstar, well, realistically, they're not. The lower card guys are definitely not superstars. That's the whole thing. They're, if they're wrestlers, they're all wrestlers. It doesn't matter. And if they're a top wrestler or a bottom tier wrestler, they're all wrestlers. If you're starting to say they're superstars, then that means, or implies that they're upper card or, at least champion level wrestlers. Legends and icons, if you're calling people legends and icons and whatnot, they really need a very, very big legacy, or whatnot. If you're calling someone the GOAT or whatever, then they need that reputation behind them. They need that legacy behind them. You can't really just call somebody the icon or whatever, without there being something there to, establish that. You wouldn't call, I don't know, right now, I guess you someone that's you might call John Cena because he's just announced his retirement, an icon, a legend, whatever. Certainly, you could say that. Randy Orton, same thing in many ways. But if you had said that, I don't know, 10 years ago or something, maybe or so, 15 years ago, whatever, that wouldn't be accurate, So, Like, you can call someone great or amazing or phenomenal or whatever else, but you know, it's there's other adjectives you can't use, like you could say this person seems like a future Hall of Famer, or this seems like a person that might be a future, world champion or something like that. You can start putting them in that bracket, or whatnot, like that style of thing, but you can't really sort of, start, almost nobody. You can't really put anybody on that pedestal, unless they're sort of already on that pedestal of being a legend, whatnot. So they've got to have that career that's sort of, man, this guy's been around for, 20 years. This guy's been around for over, 10 years at the top, like, yeah. So you've got to have those sorts of things. You've got to have those milestones. You've got to have, those accolades to really warrant and earn those things. You can't just say, oh, I'm the legend, I'm the icon, or whatever. You can start saying, I'm the best, like, because I have the belt, whatever. I'm the top, I'm the top predator, I'm the baddest man, etc. You can do those sorts of things, and whatnot, so that you can sort of not having just a moniker to have a moniker, but having a moniker in a sense of saying, I'm gonna rip everyone's head off because I'm the baddest man, and I'm gonna destroy everyone, and I'm on a rampage, and all this. Like, that's not just a moniker. It's kind of trying to be your story, and like what you can kind of expect to kind of see, and that kind of thing. So it's kind of interesting in that regard to, give somebody a moniker or a, sort of tagline like that. Not that everyone needs it, but again, you sometimes just feel like, man, this idea fits so well for this person, and sometimes it's sort of organic and it feels just right. The phenomenal AJ Styles, like, what that really came about organically for the most part. It wasn't overly manufactured, like, and then it just stuck, like, it wasn't always announced when he did something phenomenal, or whoever, the Amazing Red, when he did something amazing, you'd call him, you'd say, this is why he's the Amazing Red, or this is why he's the phenomenal AJ Styles, whatever, So, yeah, you've got to tie in all these elements, and that's also got to be thought in, like, mostly beforehand. If something comes up, organically again, that's great. But, like, you've got to think, well, what are we going for? What's the tagline of this character? In a sense, this is the man that's going to rip everyone's heads off, or whatever. He's the baddest. He's the biggest. He's the meanest. He's the, he's this monster. He's, and he's in our company. He's the baddest man in TNA. Whatever. Like, that's the idea. So yeah, I think storytelling in wrestling, and like because wrestling is very, like, wrestling is the moves, right? For the most part, like, wrestling is the moves. Storytelling is everything else, including the order, priority, timing, etc. of the moves, and, weaving that into promos, segments, and whatnot. That is what gives everything its flow. And I talked about this before on the Facebook there, I think it was, about how, there's not many, lot longer matches on TV because, well, there's just no real way to have those lot longer matches on TV. It's very difficult to have those very long matches on TV because, well, if you have a long match on TV or even a semi-long match on TV, well, you're not going to see most of it all anyway because you've got to have ad breaks, every, couple of minutes or whatever it is, every half hour or whatever it is, or maybe whatever it is, so you've got to have that advertisement to actually, sell tickets and to gain revenue and all of that sort of stuff, except for like when you have picture in picture and things like that, or whatever, but still, like, you still don't see all of the action. So you're going to miss a lot of the action just due to having ad breaks. And realistically, when you have ad breaks, well, they don't try as hard. The wrestlers know 9 times out of 10, when an ad break is, even when it's pre-taped, and will slow down the action for the most part. So you're not really missing much. You're missing a whole bunch of like rest holds and whatnot for the most part, or somebody out on the outside or whatever. So you don't really miss very much 9 times out of 10 in those ad breaks. But the ad breaks still can take away from the flow of the match, and you don't get to see the full match since again, it's a longer match. But you need to have matches longer than others. You can't have all 2-minute matches or whatever else it is. You've got to give people adequate time to have decently good matches. And this is the thing I think I talked about, like having 5-star matches every single week. Either people will get incredibly bored of you having 5-star match. Well, they'll probably get bored of you just having 5-star matches every single week, because it's so expected, for one reason, and for another reason is that that's become the norm. So now 5-star matches are nothing special. You see them every week and all the time. So, whatever. Then you've got to do something even more insane for people to actually like get into it and actually care about it. You've got to have a 6-star match or a 7-star match or whatever it is. And then like the bar just seemingly keeps getting raised and raised and raised. Well, now everyone else feels like they've got to have a 6-star match to sort of try to stand out. And then you're having all these 6-star matches or whatever. And then that becomes boring. And then you've got to have 7-star and so on and so forth, etc. And as I sort of said before, wrestling without the context, without the story, is meaning jack shit. Like, you need to have whatever you're having, and sometimes that's really tough, but again, you've got to have some meaning and some stakes and some reasons for the audience to care beyond just, this is a match, it's on TV, and it exists. Like, you've got to have more than that. If you're a diehard wrestling fan and it's just like one of the like dark matches or whatever, etc., maybe they'll watch it and that's fine. But they might see some of these young wrestlers or whatever that might be on some of these shows and be like, these kids have got something. And they're rewarded because they get to see these young kids get a chance and develop. And it's sort of exciting to see that, because it's sort of not a hidden gem, but it's something that not a lot of people will get to, or not as many people will get to see, because it's not on the main show or on the main card. It was probably just seen by the live audience and the really hardcore crowd that actually goes out of their way to actually watch some of these. Now, not all of them are great and whatnot, but some of them are pretty darn decent, even considering, especially since they only get 5 to 6 minutes or whatever it is sometimes. But they still have a really great match in those 5 to 6, 10 minutes or whatever it is. which is surprising, to see some of these great matches. I remember, like, Taryn Terrell versus Gail Kim. It's an incredibly short match, It's incredibly short, but it's still a really good match. Like, it's incredibly short, and it only has, like, a few really big spots in it. Like, but that's just the nature of the beast, being it's a 10, 11 minute or so match. And it is a bit disjointed by the fact that, you have and last knockout standing, and there's those 10 counts every now and again or whatever it is. But the pace of the match, even so, is still, pretty up there, and whatnot with that action and whatnot. So it's a very short match realistically, but I think it still holds up and does what it needs to do. It's not. I think it could have been longer, but again, like some matches, you feel like, no, that was a decent conclusion. They could have done maybe a bit more, but like, you want to always sort of keep it neat in some ways. You want to give everyone decent time as much as what you can on a show. And again, like, most wrestling shows are 2 hours long, so apart from pay-per-views, whatever. But still, you can't give everyone 20 minutes, because if you do, then you've only got like 4 or 5 matches, excluding entrances and whatnot, on your show. And again, they don't mean anything because there's no context or no real story or no real stakes or whatever else being applied to them. They're just matches following matches, so yeah, you need to have more than that. You need to have things for people to invest time and energy in a character. And that's tough work to do, So wrestling is a very diverse beast. It is entertainment. Wrestling is entertainment by its means. But entertainment can be anything. Again, wrestling is part of that because it has a broad stroke of a bit of everything. It's Shakespeare to the masses. It's a opera. It's a stunt performance. It's, everything under the sun to whoever's watching it. It's cinema. It's high drama. It's everything. It's that to whoever is watching it. And, that's what we've got to keep going with. We've got to keep that, mix of, fights, wrestling, story, and everything. It can't just, you can't rely everything on story, like I should say here at the end, I guess, because I've been talking about how important story is. But if you have all this story, all these things, and all these swerves and twists and turns and things like that, without a basis or a point or a payoff or sort of a clear conclusion, then that story doesn't mean anything either. That's how wrestling stories work. They have to have a point, a conclusion, and a payoff and an aftermath sort of the conclusion. Everything begins and ends, and things change and move ahead from then on after. Nothing is the same again after something happens or something changes or something evolves into something else or whatever else, or moves into something else, or somebody changes their alliance or whatever, etc. So everything has to work like that and has to be part of this organic flowing, thing that you see on TV week after week, month after month, year after year, etc. So yeah. But anyway, guys, that I think is pretty much it. You guys, I hope have liked this one, and I hope you guys will check out some more. So yeah, I hope you guys will see me again in the next one.